you're ready to take on the world, and I hope that you have you have properly, you know, brought in this energy from the weekend, and you're ready for the challenges that lay before us this week. Today, we want to talk about and be thankful to the Norse god Mani, or represented by Monday. Much later. But we'll get to that in just a moment. Before we do, I want to say thank you to all of you for liking, following, or subscribing on any of the platforms, and I hope that you will continue to do so. Help us to get this message out to all of those around the world who need to hear the message of hope, right? So, as we wipe the sleep from our eyes, or for those of you who are already well on your way today, I, I ask that you take a moment with me here today and to get some energy. Help us to gain some intellect and hopefully grow in the right direction. So, starting off, we want to say thank you to all of those wildly talented individuals at New Reality TV. NewRealityTV.com is is a breath, a fresh breath of air, um, of spiritual intellect, knowledge, wisdom, guidance, but most importantly, a collective of individuals who want to raise the vibration across the world. And I think it is definitely well on its way to changing all of the vibrations. So I hope that you will join newrealitytv.com each and every day. There's always going to be some form of intellect that you can use to alter your path. All right. As always, over here, we have all of our platforms of which we are incredibly thankful for. I cannot begin to express my appreciation for those three platforms who help us to produce this live message every day, in addition to, of course, New Reality TV. So, thank you so much. And thank you for all of you who have visited all of these platforms, like, followed, and subscribe. Help us to get that message out. So, thank you so much. Finally, I want to call out NorseWhispers.com. Two different pages on that site I think are super beneficial. The first one, of course, our friends, total list of those who have supported the show and support our mission here at the Alaska Uvhefnar. And finally, down below, we have NorseWhispers.com/coaching. For those of you who may need an extra set of ears to bend, by all means, reach out and we'll begin a dialogue and a conversation that hopefully we can help you discover that which you need to be successful in your own mind and your own life. So, all of that aside, let's talk a moment about Mani. Who was Mani? Mani, of course, being the moon, the brother of Sol, the sun. Mani created a balance, right? So in the midday, we have the daylight and we have the warmth of the day, right? Coming to us each and every day, the sunshine coming down upon us. And then that sunshine would evolve into an overnight, which then, we see the temperatures come back down low a little bit, cooling off for the night as we go into the, overnight. And then the following day, we begin the arc all over again for the daytime. So, Mani, night, Sol, during the day. But what did Mani bring? Well, Mani brought, firstly and foremost, we have to remember what all dark energy is. All dark energy is simply unilluminated. It's that question. It's those questions that drive us to want to learn more, to grow, to know. That's Mani, right? Mani drove the questions because his time was at night where there was very little illumination. In other words, what we see in the general function of life is that Sol would start in the morning, and she would begin to fill us with intellect and knowledge, or illuminated energy. So, then we would reach her apex. As much knowledge as she was giving, and now we're starting to have this. We're starting to try to put all of that knowledge, all of that intellect, trying to form it in our brain, and we're processing it, we're stacking it, we're putting it in the right bookshelf, right? And then that's going to come down, and then we're going to see daytime shift into nighttime, right? So the sun starts setting, and when the sun is setting in this direction, we see Mani coming to bear. Now, what's going to happen is as we get into this illuminated energy, now remember, in your mind, you've just got a bunch of intellect. And so now you've framed it, you put it in the right bookcase, but now what's that do? What's that do to us? Well, of course, it says, how does that intellect that I just got relate to this other piece of intellect that I already have? How does that work? That's where we get into the nighttime. Nighttime, or unilluminated energy, is now going to provide us with that catalyst that allows us to kind of pose those questions to the universe. Bing, they're firing off. How does this relate to this? How does that relate to this other thing? All of those questions. Now, as we get to the bottom of the night, or the apex of the night, what happens? We start kind of figuring out answers. So we're starting to get illumination, right? So that illumination then begins its climb back to beginning to take on new information of the new day, and the cycle continues, right? So that's really, a lot of people think, oh, dark energy, that's bad, that's evil, that's this terrible thing. And that is not the case. Dark energy is simply unilluminated. It's not negative energy. It's dark energy. Negative energy can only be created in the minds of humankind, of humanity. That's the only where it exists in all of the cosmos. The only place negative energy exists is within the human mind. The human mind creates it and can emit it. So it only exists on the physical plane, right? And so, like radio signals, kind of, if I create some negative energy, oh, I don't like that person, or that person's silly, or whatever, right? I'm creating that negative energy. I'm emitting that negative energy. While that negative energy may be focused at one person, in general, that's not how negative energy works. Negative energy just kind of shotguns and just. And so we could be walking along, minding our own business, and run into one of these signals, if you will, for a visual, of negative energy, not dark, negative energy. And this would have a mood change on us, be able to potentially shift what we're thinking. If we weren't paying attention, that negative energy could come in and really change things, change the way we're looking at the world. We've got to remember the way we look at the world is simply through our emotional filters behind our sensory input. And that emotional filter is set by the moment, by the present, which, as you recall, for those of you who have been watching the show or listening, the present is that micro sliver of time that exists between the experiences we have had and the ones we haven't. It's just a micro sliver, and that's where the entirety of our consciousness exists, is in the present, right? Now, some of us may dance and celebrate with the music of a previous era, whether that be, whatever, right? And we say, oh, that person's living in the past. They're technically not, right? They may be reviewing the past more more abundantly, but they are not living in the past. That's not a doable thing. We live in the present. Experiences that we have had, experiences that we haven't. That moment in time is our consciousness, is our present, right? And so, very, very critical that we understand that this is not a prolonged thing. It's not like our past, or it's not like our future. Future is from here to our eternity. Our past is from here back, for as long as we can remember, whatever that may be. So those two sections are pretty long, right? But the micro sliver of time that exists between these two is called the present, and that's where our consciousness spends our whole lifetime, is in the present. Okay? When we speak about getting going this week, man, we're ready. We got our energy. We're ready to go. Let's do this. Okay? We're living in the present. We're expecting of the future, but we're reviewing the past to move forward. Remember, every time, every present, which is, again, that moment in time, every present, we're resetting our emotional filters. Now, our emotional filters, if you don't remember, our emotional filters is what dictates how our physical sensory input interprets the reality at which we see. All of this in front of us, all of this interacting, all of that has to go through our emotional filters to make it into our memories. Now, when it does that, and it winds up in our memories, and we fall asleep, as we do every night, hopefully you get some sleep. When we're asleep, and our consciousness, remember, it slips back. It's going to slip back, and it's going to make connection between our memories and our spiritual mind. When it makes that slide and makes that connection, now our memories, interpreted as they were, are then flowed up into the spiritual realm, so that others may see our experience. Others may be able to experience our experience, right? So they see, remember when I do it quite often, and we talk about the puddle and how we're all standing around the puddle and we're seeing the puddle. When we begin to step to the left or to the right, we begin to see more of the puddle, right? We see it from different angles, different perspectives. This is where this comes from, is that we're beginning to gain additional experiences that give us an additional perspective when we're willing to kind of change. So think of it this way. If you believe something with all your heart, and you just know it to be true, but you gain some form of intellect or knowledge, whatever that may be, which now causes to question it. For the first time in all of your existence, you're not questioning this intellect. Haven't had this before. We've always just known it to be true, but yet now, what could this mean? We think, we ponder, we kind of sift it through. But what this means is that we've gained, momentarily, a different perspective. Everything in our lives, every experience that we have, has multiple perspectives. Everything. When we talk about the good and the bad, if we look at the bad parts of our lives, whatever they may be, right? Maybe a death of, in my case, a death of a parent. In my case, in previous lives, I had a drug issue. In previous lives, I had relationship issues, all of these things. As I look back on them now, of course, my perspective on them is very different. Now, granted, I still I lost my father when I was a young man, and I didn't like him very much when he was alive, when he was in his physical form. But as I've grown older, I realized he was doing the best he could do. He was trying to be a good man. And I kind of changed my perspective a little. And now I don't dislike him anymore. Am I sad that he's gone? Yes. He never met any of my children. He certainly didn't even get to meet my shield maiden. Um, so, yes, I'm sure there is some level of I wish he could have met these people. But on the same note, I also know that he was in pain, a lot of pain, before he succumbed ultimately to end stage renal failure, and so he was in a lot of pain. And now he's not. Now he's ascended into the spiritual realm. He's connected with the ancestors, and then he looks down upon me through his view, and I know he's proud. Here I've been married now 35 years. I have a home. I have, mental stability, but most importantly, I'm sure that he is most proud that I have reached my ancestors and that I'm communicating and growing spiritually. Even though when he was alive, when he was in his physical form, he wasn't very spiritual. That wasn't his thing. Little did he know that I know now that he was just trying to deny it to everyone outside, but he was as spiritual as anyone else. We're all spiritual, whether we choose to acknowledge it or celebrate it is irrelevant as to whether we're a spiritual being or not. We are always going to be a spiritual being. We have particles of energy that are within our spiritual build that is of the deities. So we have essentially no choice but to be a spiritual connection, be a spiritual being. So whether we choose to acknowledge it or not is really irrelevant. Now, when we take this idea of changing our perspectives, being able to look at things differently in real time, as it's happening, we say, oh, I broke my leg. Ow. Ow. But what could possibly be a good side? What could possibly be a good perspective of breaking our leg? Well, it's actually a couple. For the first time, for many people, it may be a time to just ponder and contemplate. We've got to rest the legs. I'm reminded last year, for those of you who don't know, I had spinal surgery. And I must admit, I wouldn't advise it for anyone unless your doctor tells you that you desperately need it. But in my case, there was calcium deposits. My bones were trying to heal themselves at such an alarming rate that they were crowding in on my spinal cord and actually beginning to paralyze my legs. And so the doctors looked at it and said, oh, we got to fix this. And so they did. And I went and I had this surgery where some of my vertebrae were fused so that they could fix my spinal cord, or just clear it away so that it wouldn't impinge on my leg movement. I was in an inordinate amount of pain. until I thought differently. And I kid you not, I began to think about, because there was some bedtime. I was bedridden for 3 days, where I did lots of prayer and thoughts, and oh, it was beautiful. But I used the time to to foster a better connection with the spiritual realm. And for the first time, here was I almost want to use an excuse, but I want the reason for me to slow down. Whoa. Pull back on the reins a little bit here. Let's slow this thing down to a walk, right? Because, with spinal surgery, walking was a big thing. But I slowed down just for a little bit as the spine healed. And I would say, a week, maybe two, I was just kind of pittering around the house. I was, of course, doing lots of prayer and lots of communicating and lots of channeling. But I just took some time to slow down. And now my connection to my spirituals, ancestors, and guides, it's like a casual conversation with a friend. So I used that time in a different way. I changed my perspective. I could have just lounged around the house. Woe is me, my back. Mind you, spinal surgery is kind of, it's a big thing up on the charts. I could have used the time to just mope and be discouraged that here I had to have back surgery or whatever. But instead, I took the opportunity to grow, to learn, to love, to make these better connections, changing the perspective. Every experience that we have from the time before we're born to the time we leave this physical form, every experience we have, we can change our perspective. We can see it as a setback or as a failure or as something bad, or we can look at it as an opportunity that it was to learn, to grow, to change, to evolve. These are the two perspectives. Everything, whether it be the loss of a friend or a loved one, whether it be something that could be conceived as maybe a car accident where someone was hurt, there is always another perspective. Many times we don't want to hear this. We want to say, "Oh, woe is me, and I need some TLC here." Okay, and that's an acceptable piece for a day, a couple hours maybe. But the person you need TLC from isn't outside. It's not extrinsic. The person you need TLC from is within. That's who you really need yourself to say, wait a minute, this happened, this was a bad situation, or whatever. But I don't have to see it that way, nor do I have to live that way. I'm not nailed to a perspective. I can change. I can change my perspective. I simply have to be open to it. Many times it's easier to just accept this kind of victim mentality and say, oh, woe is me, this bad thing happened, and now look at me, I'm so in this bad place, whatever. Or I am whenever I say the word war like that, for those of you who have not seen, um, what is it? Shang Li? No. Ching Li? Shang Li. Anyway, the new Marvel film, and wonderful, wonderful show. But anyway, in the movie, his partner, his friend, and she, whenever he's like, "Oh, I need to do all these rigid things," and she says, "Or," and then they wind up going to karaoke until wee hours of the morning, right? So, so whenever I say "or," that's what I'm referring to is looking at it differently. Sure, I could do this thing, or I can accept this almost this victim thinking where woe is me, bad thing happened, I feel bad, whatever. Or I can go doing karaoke until, very early in the morning. I can enjoy life. I can see the love. I can see happiness. I can see joy. I have that choice. We can all make that choice. Every experience, we can make that choice. We can choose happiness over sadness. We can choose to be comforted instead of in chaos. I'm always reminded of when we speak of altering between chaos and order, of the rune Hagalas. Hagalas, of course, is the rune of chaos, and it represents the letter H in the English alphabet. But in certain ways, as it lands upon the cloth, I have been instructed that it may represent the conflict of chaos, which is order. Right? So they're one and the same. They're on the same continuum. Order, chaos. You can draw a line from one to the other. So it tells us that within our mind, we too can fall into the chaos, or we can choose order in our own mind. We can make that choice every moment. Every moment. So if you're grieving a loss of a loved one, understandably, but understand that you control how long that process is. When that process is no longer providing your physical self with a value, it's time to move on. Remember, you can change your perspective anytime you want. We have a choice. You have a choice. In your mind, you're in control. All right? So you start thinking about those experiences that you have that you're not too fond of. You have a choice. You can choose to see that dark or that not acceptable side, or we can choose to see joy and love and peace and harmony. You can choose every minute. So I hope that you will choose love, harmony, peace, contentment, comfort for yourself. All right? All right, my friends, today, Mane's Day, I hope that you have a wonderful beginning of your week, and we will look forward to seeing you again tomorrow when we'll embrace the courage of tear. Very important God to me personally, as I have ancestors named after him, whom I very much recognize and honor. All right, my friends, have a wonderful week. Be sure, if you haven't had the chance, go check out New Reality TV, and we will see you again tomorrow. Love and light, my friends.